I want to welcome you to this Maxwell School Campbell Institute debate. I'm Grant Reher, the Institute's director. I'm glad to see so many of you here tonight, and I want to give a special welcome to those of you from the community beyond the university who are here, as well as those watching on our live stream and the Maxwell Alumni Network. I also want to give a big hello to those in the overflow seating, and I promise we will not forget you when we get to the final balloting and also the Q&A part of the debate, I promise. On behalf of Syracuse University and the Maxwell School, I would like to acknowledge with respect the Onondaga Nation, the indigenous people on whose ancestral lands we now sit. The question... Thank you, thank you. The question before you tonight is whether you support the proposal for a metropolitan form of government for Onondaga County as set forward by the Consensus Commission on Local Government Modernization. This is a complicated issue involving different trade-offs, questions of governmental efficiency and accountability, and democratic representation and democratic leadership. And as citizens, we are all, or at least as many of us as will go to the polls, going to have to render a decision on this if it is ever to be implemented. So this debate is not simply an academic enterprise. We're fortunate to have a great set of folks to debate this issue. They have donated their time here tonight as well as their preparation time in order to do this, and Campbell and Maxwell are very grateful for that. I won't introduce them, as you have their short bios in the brochure, and I have a feeling that you may know who they are already. I'll simply identify them now, and then in a minute or two, they will join us. In favor of the proposition, we have, in the order in which they will make their first set of remarks, Bill Byrne, chairman of the board of Byrne Dairy, and former Congressman Jim Walsh. Against the proposition, we have Syracuse Mayor Stephanie Miner and Onondaga County Comptroller Bob Antonacci. And you'll see him in a minute, but I want to just thank him in particular for donning garb that fits the Oxford Union debate tradition. So I want to thank in particular Kelly Coleman and Christine Brown of the Campbell Institute. They've worked very, very hard to put this event together, and the great students from Maxwell's Public Affairs program who are helping us out tonight. I also want to thank the Dean's Office of the Maxwell School for its support of our efforts. And I also want to thank WRVO for agreeing to broadcast a version of this debate at a later date. We have many civil servants and some public officials in the audience, and I want to acknowledge them as a group, and I want to thank them for coming out to hear this exchange. So now let me very briefly go over the ground rules and expectations, particularly for what you can do to help make this debate a success, because your participation is essential to it. The more specific ground rules are contained in the brochure that you received when you first entered, but first, if you haven't already done so, please silence your smartphones. And as I said, we have 4 panelists who are going to debate the proposition. The speakers will alternate between each side, and they'll have about 8 minutes to speak each in their initial remarks. Then they'll have an opportunity, working as teams, to further rebut and directly question what the other side has said. After that, we're going to open it up to all of you. You'll be able to pose questions or make points directed to one or the other teams. Once you are recognized, and I will call on you, and I'll try to call on 2 people at a time with the hands that I see. We have microphones that will be passed to you, and we ask for 2 things. First, that you wait for the microphone, as we want to have your comments be part of the archive program and the live stream that we've got running right now. And second, that you are brief and to the point, and that you give the microphone back when you are done, after you've stated your question or made your point, because I'm sure there are many of you who will want to speak, and we obviously have very limited time. Then each team will have a very brief chance to make a closing argument, and then after that, you will render your decision by walking out one of these two sets of doors, and I'll say more about that at the end of the debate. We'll also have a paper ballot. For now, just note that the affirmative door is on this side, and then the negative door is on that side. And here's another detail on this, which is important and part of the civic nature of this. But in order to be counted in the post-debate tally, you must stay until the completion of the debate. That seems only fair to the enterprise. And then in the reception that follows outside, you'll have a chance to meet the debaters and to continue the conversation, and I'll announce the results from the pre-debate polling and the post-debate polling. So I have three final things I want to say. First, as some of you are no doubt aware, not only is the substance of this proposal controversial, the very language that has been used to describe it has also attracted controversy. And our purpose here is to consider the merits of the proposal itself. Second, some of you are here, I hope, because you're wrestling with this question and you're trying to figure out what you think and how to vote. That's fantastic. Others may be pretty sure what they think, and that's fine too. We just ask for mutual respect and civility. And very last, this is not a presidential debate, so please do not comment, shout, applaud, laugh, or otherwise interrupt while the speakers are speaking, but I would ask you now to give a very hearty welcome to the debaters. So, Bill Byrne, the floor is yours.
My goodness, isn't this fun? Good evening. When I began my work as chair of the Infrastructure Committee, I didn't know very much about the structure and operational side of local government. From my 42-year business career in Syracuse, I knew that the city had lost a lot of jobs and residents and was experiencing rising levels of poverty. I knew that our property taxes were high and that Onondaga County was not growing. But as the Consensus Commission started its work, I got educated pretty quickly. I heard about our 36 public works departments, 25 of which are responsible for 25 miles of road or less. I learned about our 54 fire departments. 27 of these respond to an average of 1 call a day. The list goes on. 3 water providers, 15 law enforcement agencies, 2 separate corrections departments. I learned that some of our government structure dates back to the late 1700s and is based on what the reasonable distance was that somebody could travel on a horse. No one would build new government structures the way they were built more than 200 years ago. The statistics show that we're a community in trouble, both in Syracuse and Onondaga County. We've had no population growth since 1970. We've lost 24,000 jobs since 1990. Our current job growth is 1/4 of the U.S. average since the recession. We have the highest concentration of African American and Hispanic poverty in the country. The Infrastructure Committee met with public officials as we developed our recommendations. We heard what was going well and where improvements were needed. Tom Rhodes from County Water Environmental Protection told us, "We are not currently structured to meet the Environmental Protection Agency's 10 attributes for an effective wastewater utility." He told us that even though wastewater is 88% consolidated on a cost basis, there are significant parts of the wastewater infrastructure that are beyond his control from a legal standpoint. We met with Bill Lansley, Onondaga County Commissioner of Parks and Recreation. The parks in the county are about 80% consolidated on a cost basis, and they're running well. Parks and Recreation's management team has the skills in place to hammer out private-public deals such as lights on the lake and the operation of the amphitheater, shifting risk away from us taxpayers. Onondaga County Parks and Recreation does an excellent job in running unique facilities such as the Rosamond Gifford Zoo. If you look on TripAdvisor.com, you'll see that the zoo is the top-rated thing to do in the Syracuse area. It's nationally ranked in the top 10% of zoos for financial performance. If you have a few minutes, take a look at the history of our zoo on Wikipedia and what happened after the zoo was moved from city to county responsibility in 1979. It's an outstanding example of the success that can be achieved when this community works together. The Infrastructure Committee learned of other examples where consolidation has already taken place, resulting in both reduced costs and more efficient operations. Purchasing has been consolidated in the county. It has gone so well that other counties are using our purchasing department as a service provider. On January 1st this year, the Onondaga County Water Authority and the Metropolitan Water Board merged, with an estimated saving of as much as $1 million per year. I recently heard Joni Mahoney discuss this. She said that there are gloom and doom predictions every time a merger like this takes place, but guess what? When we turned on our taps after the merger, water came out. The Southern Onondaga Trash System bids out trash collection service for 4 towns in the southwest corner of the county. Residents of those towns pay roughly half the cost in towns where there is no municipality involvement. The present situation in solid waste disposal is a clear example of how effective government can achieve significant savings. Cost benchmarking done right here at the Maxwell School has demonstrated that a municipally brokered bid process is the least costly approach. These examples of successful consolidation have a common theme. They take advantage of economies of scale. Working from a larger base allows for stronger and deeper management, better staffing with better training, and more efficient use of facilities and assets. It's a basic economic principle that all of us in the business world have harnessed, and its power is just as strong in the public sector as it is in the private sector. The consensus report points out a number of areas where taking advantage of economies of scale will lead to lower cost and better service. If there's a poster child for consolidation in the consensus report, it is street and highway maintenance, where we have 36 separate service providers, including the county, the city, 19 towns, and 15 villages. It's not cheap. We spent $141 million in 2013, the third highest cost function in the community. Because there are so many providers doing basically the same thing, we were able to do some comparative cost analysis, and the final report includes 3 graphs of this. The variability of the data is startling. Looking at cost per centerline mile of roadway, the highest cost providers are 4 times the lowest cost, and the difference is highly correlated to size. The report recommends a new approach. Instead of providing highway maintenance by the geographic structure of the cities, towns, and villages, let's do it another way, by population density. We think this approach can save $2 to $3 million per year. I need to tell you what I think about the big picture. First, our government needs to be structured so that it's effective and efficient. In many functions, we need to right-size our operations. Second, we need to recognize that we're one community. When you're out of town and someone asks you where you're from, what do you say? You tell them you're from Syracuse, not Manoa or Elbridge or Jamesville. 69% of workers in Onondaga drive to a different municipality to work every day. We're all dependent on the special organizations that are mostly located in the city, such as the hospitals, Syracuse University, and government offices. If we're one community, why would we have 2 complete governments? Our survival depends on jobs. Companies come and go. We have got to attract our share of new businesses. Companies need to evaluate this area relative to their other options and come to the conclusion that Syracuse provides them with the best opportunity to be successful. We need one economic development organization that will convince them that Syracuse is where they need to be. You probably heard about the recent Brookings Institution report that ranked Syracuse dead last in economic growth out of 100 metropolitan areas in the country. Since we've just completed March Madness, let's pretend that we're the basketball team that finished last in the country. How would you respond? First, you do some soul searching and look for the reasons why you got this result. Then you'd change your leadership by hiring a new coach who would bring in a new system. Many people have said, show us where consolidation has worked. We usually respond with examples like Louisville, Nashville, Jacksonville, and Indianapolis, but there's an excellent one closer to home, New York City, which combined 5 local governments in 1898 and never looked back. I think it's the capital of the world. In the Brookings Institution report I quoted earlier, the New York City metropolitan area ranked in the top half nationally for economic growth. And let's not forget what a powerhouse New York State is. If this state were an independent nation, its economy would rank 12th in the world, ahead of Spain. Yet here Syracuse Metro is, ranked last in economic growth. Our local government structure is holding us back, and it's time to take action. I think the recommendations of the consensus report give us the blueprint for what a new system should look like, and I'm proud to have been a part of this effort. Thank you for having me here, and I'm looking forward to a frank and productive discussion tonight.
Mayor Miner.
Thank you. I want to start off by thanking the Campbell Institute for having this, thanking all of you and people in Overflow as well. I want to thank Bill and Congressman Walsh and all of the members of Consensus. They were volunteers and they all worked extremely hard. And I think they all got a lesson in what all of us local government officials know, which is people really care about local government. I had this object lesson when I ran for mayor in 2009. I had a guy approach me and he pulled me aside and he said to you, I want to talk to you about trash, and I want to talk to you about economic development, I want to talk to you about the schools. And I spent 10 minutes giving him my best. And he said, you know what, kid? I like you and I'm going to vote for you. I thought, oh, this is great. I said, well, that's terrific, sir. Where do you live? And he said, Lysander. Now, nobody from Lysander has ever voted for me, yet anyway. But what we learned is, and as Bill said, the city of Syracuse is incredibly important to all of us here. And the data backs that up. The census tells us 62,000 people come in from outside to the city of Syracuse. 37% of all of the jobs in Onondaga County are within a 3-mile radius of downtown. 50% of the jobs in Onondaga County are in the city of Syracuse. The top 5 employers, none of which pay property taxes, by the way, are located in the city of Syracuse. Syracuse is the healthcare center, the recreational center, the cultural center, the economic center of central New York. And that is incredibly important for where we are as a country right now, because we are in the midst of the 21st century, which is the century of cities. The Brookings Institute and McKinsey will tell you more people than ever are living in cities. And that's because in a knowledge-based economy like we are living through, people need to come together and they thrive off the diversity and the creativity. And it's whether it's Moore's Law that you learned here or the knowledge-based doubling or the digital economy, that is all happening in cities. And look, we've seen it happen here. The vibrancy that my opponents don't like to actually point out. Downtown has had more people living in it than ever before. They have had more growth than ever before. When I started my elective career, there was big talk about the precursor to Center State CEO did a huge study and talked about the brain drain and how we were losing people under the age of 35. At the time, I was under the age of 35, so people used to come and talk to me about it. They paid thousands, if not millions of dollars to do studies, all of which said, have a vibrant, creative downtown, have an open community and tolerance, and people will flock back. And guess what? They have. And we've seen that tax productivity downtown far outpaces the tax productivity in the suburbs. And you don't hear people talking about the brain drain anymore. 71% of downtown residents are under 35, 40% increase in population in the last 5 years, a 99% occupancy rate, a 50% increase in population since 2006. And those aren't my statistics. Those are Center State CEO's Downtown Committee statistics. There is growth in our community, and it's happening in the city. Let me tell you the other place where there's growth happening. Immigrants. We have had plus 11,000 immigrants move into our community, and 98% of them have come into the city of Syracuse. Per capita, we are the 4th largest recipient of refugees in the United States. And yet, outside of that topic, Onondaga County has lost 18,000 people, domestic migration. So if it weren't for the immigrants in our community, we'd be doing even worse than we already are. So Syracuse is a burgeoning, vibrant city that has its challenges. Absolutely. So it's not just important to the people who live outside of Syracuse, obviously, though. It's important to the people who live in the city of Syracuse as well. A city's performance has to be measured in ways that just aren't a bank. And look at New York City. In the late 60s and the early 70s, New York City was on the brink. President Ford said, drop dead, New York City. They didn't say get rid of New York City and consolidate it into Long Island. They doubled down and said we have to find out what works for us. So a city's performance has to be measured in social conditions and education. It is more than a bank. It's a place that gives voice to often the voiceless, to the people in our country who've been disenfranchised. And all we need look is at our history in the city of Syracuse. As a national conversation was roiling about whether or not we had the right to marry who we loved, it was the city of Syracuse that 15 years ago proudly raised the rainbow flag and over again said people should have the right to marry. And we had rallies, and over again we stood there and said to our state leaders and our federal leaders, this is something that we believe in. Our country is being roiled right now about immigrants and immigration. It was the city of Syracuse and the leadership in the city of Syracuse that said, we value immigrants because that's how we all got here. And we're going to be a sanctuary city because we're going to stand for those values. There was silence from other places. And how about poverty? There's a huge discussion going on in our country about income inequality. And yet you saw in the city of Syracuse very early on, people make hard choices and decide to take advantage of Say Yes, give millions of dollars when we didn't have millions of dollars, before anybody else was doing it. And now because of that, we have almost 4,000 students enrolled in 2- and 4-year education systems. And we have a 75% retention rate at 2- and 4-year colleges. It's a huge success, and we did it first. And New York State right now, and the governor is talking about what an accomplishment they just did in Albany. They followed our lead with the right to marry. They followed our lead with free tuition. They have followed our lead, in all due respect, with infrastructure as well. I started talking about infrastructure, and I was told, fix your own pipes. This year in this state budget, there's $2.5 billion for water infrastructure. So guess who's helping fix our pipes? That's what advocacy is about. That's what leadership's about. But what we have is a group of people who said, take this burgeoning, challenging issue and make it a debt district. Almost as if, you'll forgive me, but it's like a British colony. And the last time our folks were subject to a British colony, our ancestor hightailed it out of there, got in a boat, and came over here. A debt district would take all $1 billion worth of legacy costs and liabilities and keep them right here. Nobody's going to expand a business or move into a business when they see that they're saddled with those results. Young people aren't going to stay here or buy because of the creativity that drifts apart. And you would have all the liabilities and none of the services. And you would be disenfranchising the very people who are essential to the vibrancy of our region. Poor people, black people, gay people, young people, immigrants. They would make it far too costly to live or start a business in the city of Syracuse. As I said, Brookings, McKinsey, anywhere you look, cities are the economic drivers of our nation, of our county, of our region. By saddling the city of Syracuse with a $1 billion debt and calling us a debt district, we make them less competitive. Residents will move out who can afford to. People will stay here. The entire region will suffer. With a 21st century knowledge-based economy, the dissolution of Syracuse would condemn the entire central New York region to poverty. Put succinctly, replacing a vibrant city with a debt district will extinguish any idea of having a vibrant county or a vibrant region.
Thank you. Congressman Walsh.
Good evening. Last time I was here, I was in the middle of a political debate. This is a little more enjoyable. Thank you, Grant, for organizing this. I have some prepared remarks, which I will provide and I will read, but I would just like to comment on a couple things that the mayor said. I agree with most of what she said. This is a great city, but its trajectory is wrong. The challenges are great. The resources are few. The mayor made a decision this year to cut the road improvement budget by half, to $2 million. So the city will spend $2 million, which gets you 2 miles of road repairs in a city with 411 miles of roads. That's a 200-year replacement cycle. The city was just forced to close recently the busiest fire barn in the city because they couldn't afford the repairs. So it is a wonderful city, but is it sustainable? That's why we're here. That's why we're here. Because as Bill Hudnut, the former mayor of Indianapolis, told me, you can't have suburbs around nothing. You've got to take care of your city, and that's what we're about here. So let me begin with a simple declarative sentence. We can do better. Our current government structures don't serve us well. 200 years ago, we set up these forms of government. This is what prompted our review. We're fractured. We have 500 elected officials and appointed officials in a community of less than 500,000 people. We pay a premium for redundant services, 15 villages, 19 towns, 36 highway departments, 54 fire departments, 14 police departments, and I could go on. Last month, we held town and village elections. The winners had 11 votes, 13 votes total. The winners. Tens of thousands of residents didn't even vote from those jurisdictions. With our patchwork quilt of local governments, how many truly know which government is responsible for which service? Where's the accountability? How many even know there was an election? Is that good representation? We must do better. In Onondaga County, our electorate is 37% Democrat, 29% Republican, 34% unaffiliated or affiliated with another party. Yet, our county legislature has 13 Republicans and 4 Democrats. Not to pick on one party over the other, the city of Syracuse, the electorate is 55% Democratic, 15% Republican, 30% unaffiliated or enrolled in other parties, and yet 9 out of 10 city councilors are Democrats. Minority populations are woefully underrepresented in our current structures of government. In the city of Syracuse, people of color make up 44% of our population, and yet only 22% of the voting members of the Common Council are from that community. Each of the metro governments that we reviewed, and you've heard a number of them listed, does much better job of minority representation than we do. People see the problems with our current structures. Just look at the voter turnout. When it comes to representation, we can do a lot better. We've proposed a model we believe will do better. As Bill showed, we followed the data. We've also listened to thousands of people across the community and heard their priorities. What do they want? Better access to elected officials, local voices at the table, representation that's responsive, a legislative body that's inclusive, an ability to solve big problems, and we face big problems as a community. If we were starting with a clean sheet of paper, nobody would draw the lines the way they're drawn today. So how do we do this? We begin by insisting on independently drawn districts rather than politically gerrymandered districts. This way, we're more likely to see a balance of officials who more closely reflects the population. There are a number of ways to do this. In Louisville, they hired a geographer from the University of Louisville to lead the process of drawing new districts. Neighborhoods and communities of interest will take precedence over maintaining political power. We propose smaller districts, much smaller, 16,000 residents per district. Currently, the Common Council, there are 28,000 residents. In the County Ledge, there are 27,000, so much smaller. This is better access. This brings truly local voices. This is more responsive and ultimately more inclusive. We have balanced districts. No single segment of the community will hold the majority. We'll have city districts, suburban districts, rural districts. We'll have blended districts, city and county, city and outside of the city, that are 50-50. Currently, there's an incredible disadvantage to the city the way these districts are blended. And 4 at-large districts, so that we'll have individuals on the legislature focused on community-wide issues and not parochial issues. With this approach, we'll start to act as one community, which only makes sense since 7 out of every 10 of us get up every morning and go to work in another municipality. We are highly interconnected. It's time for a new political dynamic, which will help us to solve problems through a new prism, a new structure that takes us away from the divisive view of town versus village, city versus county. We need a new paradigm for how we see ourselves and a commitment to work together. Of course, none of this happens without your vote. Throughout the country, nearly every community that has chosen to modernize its government structure and services has done so through the voice of the people, a grassroots effort to examine the possibilities, followed by a public referendum. That's what we've begun here in the last 3 years. Since consensus was formed, every member of our commission, and we are all volunteers, has gone out into the community to talk with our neighbors across the county. We've held over 100 meetings, had 6,000 people attend these meetings, not to mention the social media and the action that we've gotten on our website. We've listened to your priorities. We've heard your call for more jobs and a growing economy that invites our next generations to stay here and thrive. After all, what is this all about if we don't have our kids and our grandkids with us? We've heard your desire to no longer be the community with the 14th highest property taxes in the nation. How many times have you heard that? We've heard you tell us that you like services that you receive, but you're worried about cuts you've seen to funding for things like parks, road improvements, police and fire services, and more. We've heard you say that we should be a community that controls its own destiny and is less dependent upon Albany and Washington. We've even commissioned a community-wide survey by the Siena Institute of Research to see if it reflected what we were hearing in those 100 meetings. It did. And it's clear that our community is open to coming together and creating the second largest city in the state of New York and the 38th largest city in the United States of America. The survey shows 48% of our community is open to a new metropolitan government. 45% would stick with the status quo. The balance are undecided. A majority of our community supports consolidation in every service category: infrastructure, economic development, municipal operations, governance, public safety. Now, we have done our part. Now it's up to you. If there is a change, it's only going to come through the people, not through the elected officials. You need to demand that your voice is heard on this issue through a public referendum. Don't let anyone take your voice away. Thank you.
Thank you. Comptroller Antonacci.
I want to welcome everyone to the Debt District of Syracuse. Thank you for joining us tonight. We were outside, so I couldn't hear if a professor had introduced all of the mayors of our sewer and lighting districts. I want to make sure that was done. Tonight, we are being asked to adopt a metropolitan form of government because, as consensus proponents advocate, it will save our community and move us forward. This merger is being touted as driving economic growth and will solve a host of problems from lack of jobs to high taxes. Support for establishing a metropolitan form of government comes from desperation. The congressman is right. We must do better, but we agree on how to get there. Central New York has been desperate for so long for a miracle, we have been inclined to believe whatever the snake oil salesmen have offered without proof or evidence. The community will be disappointed by the real-world results of consensus, and that is why I am against it. What problem does consensus purport to solve? We are overtaxed, overregulated, have had little economic growth in our community, and our population continues to stagnate, if not regress. Let me dispense with the false premises of a metropolitan government will cut our taxes. Consensus Commission just as much concedes the primary finding of the commission was little or no tax savings. However, in the final report, the range of possible savings on the motion before the House, which is the merger, was a potential savings from $8.7 million to $22.9 million. The rest of the savings projected by consensus can be done without the merger that is before this House. My office has offered to audit these estimates and projections, but was politely rebuffed. After years of performing consolidation, and shared services audits for our local municipalities through our CSI task force, we would offer a valuable service to our community. Any projections of savings must be thoroughly audited and vetted before it is put to a vote. We all know what happens when we pass something to find out what is in it. With regard to these savings, I would ask, have things been done like working with the unions and assessing the bargaining potential and the bargaining impact when these governments merge? A mere change in structure without significant and demonstrable savings is nothing more than a sign of desperation and an appeal to our base fears. The morning after our new government, as Mr. Burns says when you're out of town, you're either going to have to say you're from Anancuse or Saradega. We will be disappointed, however. Now, not disappointed in us. I mean, look at this room. Look at our community. Look at the volunteers from Consensus that have invested their time and effort into this elixir. We will be disappointed because way too much of our government policies, taxation, regulation, unfunded state mandates are just out of our control. So we must ask, what is the cause of our demographic and economic stagnation? The answer is clear: New York State taxation and regulatory policy. The Consensus apologists will say, don't go there, it's not all the state's fault. But did you know in 1960, New York State was the most populous state in the Union? Today, we are number 4. Because of this relative loss in population, we have also lost power in Washington, D.C. This stagnation is not just a local problem, nor are the solutions solely found in local government. The last major reform of local government occurred when Onondaga County moved from a Board of Supervisors form of government to the county charter form of government just back in the 1960s. And do you know what happened? Carrier shuttered most of its manufacturing operations. GM closed. New Venture Gear Chrysler closed. The middle class in our county was eviscerated. And as Center State CEO stated in a recent email, our county has had no population growth since 1970. We are ranked last out of 100 cities in economic growth. Our city is 23rd poorest in the United States. Our population is fleeing. Our tax structure is the worst in all 50 states. And there's just about every day an article on that issue. We spend more on education per pupil than any state with less than expected results. Our electric rates are the highest in the nation, save Hawaii. And we spend more on Medicaid than Texas and Florida combined. Now, does anyone seriously attribute all of these ills to the 1960 charter form of government? I would hope not. Just as I would hope that you would seriously not say that a new reformation of local government would suddenly unleash this dormant potential in Onondaga County. The Consensus apologists will cry out, we have 10,500 local governments and we need to do something. This number is smoke and mirrors. The truth is we have about 3,100 local governments, but again, why let facts get in the way of a good story? One just needs to revisit the headlines of a week or so ago involving the Collins-Faso Amendment to gain an appreciation of the state mandates that are passed down on local governments. In our county, where Medicaid alone makes up 70% of our county property tax bill, appropriately labeled state mandated costs. This year alone, our mandates have gone up over $10 million. The Consensus plan and proposition before the House assumes both immediate tax savings and potential future tax increases will somehow be minimized by the merger. I disagree, because we are not changing the rules by which the new government will operate. Saradega will still be under the oppressive thumb of state government. Despite the claims we would magically become a larger city, we will receive no additional senators or members of the Assembly to combat the downstate influence. I therefore do not see how bigger is necessarily better. Rather, all of the tax laws, the rules, the unfunded mandates will continue to litter our property tax bills, continuing to drive up cost as Albany cannot quench its thirst for our tax money. Anancuse, or just the Cuse, will be subject to the Wicks law, the Taylor law, Medicaid, while our school districts also comply with edict after edict that comes with no funding. Did I mention our workers' comp laws, our heavy taxes and health insurance, and our pricey energy bills, all outside of local control? Our citizens will wake up the morning after the merger expecting a new beginning, only to be disappointed as the hemorrhaging continues. Our way forward is to buck the status quo. To get jobs back to our community, we need statewide reform. We need to compete on the tax field and lessen regulations. I respectfully submit our worthy opponents tonight have not met their burden. Will a metropolitan government make us more competitive? Will it attract more population? Will a metropolitan government bring back employers and thusly the jobs we so crave? Will a metropolitan government really cut our property taxes? Again, at Onondaga County, our 5 key state mandates have gone up $10 million in 1 year alone, yet the consensus projection maybe is as low as $8 million. So that savings is gone right there. Vote for the proposition if you must. Vote for it if it makes you feel better or as a sign of defiance. We will succeed, and I certainly hope so. But eventually, we will have to turn our energy collectively on the beast that is Albany, for that is where the costs are, and that is where the rules must be changed for any local government, much less a newborn, to be successful. Thank you.
So we will move now to the rebuttal periods. We'll start with the affirmative. You have 10 minutes for your rebuttals and questions, so go ahead.
Again, just by briefly responding to my worthy adversary, Mr. Antonacci, you know, we can control what we can control. We can't control the state, but we can control our own destiny here locally. And we need to fix what we can fix. And that's what we're about here. Both the mayor and the controller mentioned this debt district idea. Just to be clear, in any consolidation, any merger, the state law requires that the debt remains where it's incurred. So the debt that the city has incurred will remain with the city, just as the debt that the county has, that the towns have would remain with them. But there'll be lots of help on the other services from the rest of the community. So that's a way to provide additional resources to the city. Now, speaking of resources, I'd like to pose a question to Comptroller Antonacci. Bob, you pride yourself on knowing budgets backwards and forwards, and I suspect that you've taken a look at what's happening in the towns and villages, and it's not just the city that has economic challenges right now. So the trajectory is revenues are relatively flat, costs are escalating. And so the county now shares its sales tax with the city, not with the towns and villages. I'd like to ask you if you would support a redistribution of the sales tax to the towns and villages and take it away from the city and the county.
I believe that sales tax should be shared countywide. So if that answers your question, I'm not a fan of the current agreement, and I think if we were to go back to sharing that, it would be more equitable for the towns and villages as they make those investments in our community.
Thank you.
Isn't this kind of the point, though? Isn't it that we sit around here and we say, oh, we want to make promises, we're going to cut property taxes, the city's going to have the debt, but we're going to give you more resources? No, the city's going to have $1 billion of debt and no revenue. And guess what happens? It'll sit there. And so if you want to open a business, you want to buy a house in the city, they're going to say to you, by the way, you used to get great services, your trash used to be picked up, you used to have a fire department that would come to your house, you used to have a police department that would come to your house. Now they go all across the city. Our property taxes are being driven by mandates from New York State. Ask E.J. McMahon on the conservative side from the Empire Center. Ask Mildred Warner from Cornell. Ask the legislators and the governor themselves when they stood up and talked about the property tax cap. They said, it's going to be fantastic. The first thing we're going to do is freeze property taxes, and the next thing we're going to do is get mandate relief. And guess what we're still waiting for? Mandate relief. I disagree with the congressman about we can't control New York State. We absolutely can control New York State. That's why we vote for them. That's why we advocate. Just because the first time they say no to you, or they insult you, or they disagree with you, you keep coming back for more. So 200 years ago, we formed a government. Guess what? We had a constitution that still works pretty well. We still have separation of powers that works pretty well. Just because something is old doesn't mean it's broken. And I would also posit to all of you, if you want to have good public policy in this home of extraordinary study of good public policy, you start by identifying the real problem. And the real problem is that the onerous mandates, which Consensus itself mentioned in their successful application to the transformative Hunger Games, and they said, it's onerous mandates, and we're going to join you and work on those. And yet we've heard nothing. We've heard that, well, we hope New York State will come in and do something. The reality is we have to force them to do it. Now, I also want to just respectfully, Congressman, you said that the city of Syracuse has less than 30% minority representation on the council. They have 30%, and we're not counting women. I will also share with you that when you look at what the other governments that you have talked about, Louisville and Nashville, and the other places where they have had consolidations, they've lost minority representation. They haven't gained it. Now, I noticed that in a couple of presentations that you guys or somebody on your side gave.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Isn't this supposed to be our rebuttal?
Well, I'm watching. I've got it.
I want to be.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
No, that's
This
all
is
right.
really our time to rebut.
Well, then
Is it
I
not?
will respectfully sit back and let you rebut.
Okay, well, I'll start with it.
Per the conversation that we had prior to the debate, the affirmative will have 2 more minutes of time.
I think we're getting a little bit theoretical. Right now, the city's debt service, the so-called debt district, is $16 million a year. That's what it is, okay? The city is, you've just proposed a budget that's $18.5 million short of balancing, but we're not in a crisis situation. You mentioned E.J. McMahon from Albany. He just said in the paper today that we are in better shape than a lot of other communities from a debt standpoint. But one of the things that you've accused consensus of is stripping assets from the city. And let's talk about that a little bit, okay? There's 411 miles of city streets. This year, your paving budget is just 2 miles. At that rate, it's going to take us 2 centuries to get to all the streets, to repave all the streets in the city. Firehouse number 7, station number 7 was closed for less than $1.5 million in repairs that were needed for it. That station would have been the first to respond if this building caught fire. You've had to make significant cuts to the parks budget too. Are these the assets that you're talking about?
Yes, I am. So let me talk about our Parks Department. Our Parks Department provides funding and provides programming for the poorest people in our region. And so they provide summer programming and parks programming, making sure they have breakfast and lunch. We are a service provider. Most of the people in my city will never go on vacation. The only vacation they have are our Parks Department and the programming that we have and making sure that our pools stay open and they have constructive activities to do. That is vastly different than what the Parks Department does in the county. And Station 7, we closed it and response time didn't change at all. And health and safety was not put at risk at all. And the paving budget that you keep coming over and over again to, that's only a small portion of the equation. New York State every year passes, and I saw there's somebody here from New York State, every year they pass millions of dollars in CHIPS money and TIP money, Transportation Improvement Program, where we get reimbursed. So this is just our local share. That's not the total share of it. But am I stripping assets? And let me go back too. There is
Let's put that in the negatives rebuttal if we could. I want to make sure you have plenty of time. Go ahead.
Yeah, let's go back. Let's talk about the issue of sustainability. Last year, the city of Syracuse withdrew $12 million from its rainy day fund just to make ends meet. Today, the balance stands at about $43 million. Without some painful measures, the city is on pace to be out of money by the end of 2020. Mayor, you've warned on more than one occasion that bankruptcy may be in this community's future. To your credit, you're making tough decisions. Syracuse is cutting services, leaving more potholes to fill, more streets to pave, more water pipes to replace. Many towns and villages are also facing tough choices. The needs are growing while the bank accounts are dwindling. How does this lead to a prosperous future for our community?
Sounds like a question.
The answer is that when virtually 70% of your budget is being driven by mandates, that's the cause of our dwindling resources, is the fact that we have to pay for pensions. In the 8 years that I've been mayor, our pension payments have gone up 300%. There is nothing that we can do about that. The largest expenses that we have our binding interest arbitration with our police department and our fire department. That's a policy set by Albany. So and Syracuse, as you said, is not alone. The city of Albany is already bankrupt. They were bankrupt last year. They got a $12.5 million infusion of cash. They did it again this year. Yonkers has a higher fiscal stress. Monroe County has the highest fiscal stress of any of the counties. Nassau County is already in a financial control board. The city of Buffalo has been in and out of a financial control board. What do all of these have in common? New York State. So you can't take the trends that are impacting all of us and say, City of Syracuse and Onondaga County, you can solve this alone by disenfranchising your people, by giving up your voices.
You've got more time if you like.
Yeah, thank you. There are, I'm told, over 200 people who came out tonight to hear this debate, and God bless you for it. I'm glad you're here. We were told by one of our county legislators that this proposal was dead on arrival. How many of you were asked before he said that? It's a rhetorical question. Another one said, nobody's for this, everybody's opposed to it. Again, did anyone ask you before that county legislator said nobody is for this? We have a poll that says better than half of the people who were polled, who have made up their minds, are for it. So let me just ask this question of our two worthy opponents. Would you support taking this to the people, ask the county legislature to send a memorializing resolution to the state, and ask the city council to send a home rule message or a memorializing, easy for me to say, legislation to the state, asking that the people have an opportunity to vote on whether or not to proceed?
I have no problem with the people having an opportunity to vote on this, but as leaders, elected leaders, we have people coming to us on a daily basis saying this is a bad idea, this is not what we want. But there are too many unanswered questions, and I, as the comptroller, have an obligation to let the community know of the pitfalls that are in these consolidation decisions. Have we gone through the union bargaining agreements? Have we talked about the impacts on unions? Let's talk about a decision that was touted as the savior in the original plan, merging our corrections department with the sheriff's custody at the public safety building. And it was touted as, oh, we got two corrections departments. What are we doing? Why can't we just have one? Well, you know why? We've got two different unions, and if we merge them, we're looking at about $1 million increase in salary. If we...
Not if both unions survive.
Under the Taylor law, you're going up. You're not going down. And when you start merging rules on who gets seniority on vacation days and which health insurance survives.
If both contracts survive and you just consolidate the management teams, there would be a saving without
good
having
luck
to
with
start
that.
over again.
All right, let's talk about police department. You have the City of Syracuse Police Department and the Sheriff's Department merging together. There's a touted savings of...
You wrap this point up here, and then we're going to move to the negative.
Touted savings of $3 million. Again, has anybody talked to the unions? There's a $4,000 discrepancy in the starting pay between a Syracuse police officer and an Onondaga County Sheriff deputy. That rate, that's going up. You're not going to have these men and women in uniform making different salaries, but answering to one common boss. It's not going to happen.
Final comment.
So for the record, you're for a vote by of the people.
Oh, sure, put it to the
for the referendum with some reservations.
Absolutely,
Mayor?
no problem. Love the conversation.
So I would say that, thanks, consensus. I would say that I am all in favor of votes. That's how I live and die, is by votes and asking people to vote for me. But what are you asking them to vote for? You say, and I want to quote you exactly, what are we doing this?
This is a good segue to your rebuttal, so we'll start the negatives rebuttal here. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Yeah. I believe I heard you say in your introductory remarks, what are we doing this for if not for our children and our grandchildren? Excellent. It's eloquent. You don't address any of the school district. 45% of the children in our county go to school in the city school district. And they are part of a dependent relationship. And so what happens to them? Now, I can tell you that every person that I've ever talked to in this community asks me about education. And they ask me about what happens to their children. And you're just going to leave them orphaned. I'm not going to go to voters and tell them to vote for something when the most important asset that they have, their children's future, isn't addressed. And you can say, you know, we'll talk about it later. We don't talk about children's futures later. I would also tell you that when you say strip its assets, yeah, you're taking our assets and then telling people we're going to leave you the liabilities. And the liabilities are $1 billion of legacy costs. Believe me, I look at those debt offerings and I know exactly. Their legacy costs, their healthcare costs, their pension costs for people who are long gone. The reason that our costs are so much heavier than Onondaga County, it's very easy. We're an older city. That's all it is. So you take our assets, you leave us with $1 billion in the debt district. Well, what's going to happen, property owners? What's going to happen, people who pay taxes? What's going to happen to your children? We don't go to voters. Let me be very clear. It's been my experience in this community, as I think the comptroller eloquently said, we have been promised magic bullet solutions. Nothing like it in the world. Don't worry, it's going to be nothing like it in the world. And you know what it is? It's a mall. And we were promised that we were going to have so much sales tax receipts that it was going to dwarf our property tax revenues. Hasn't happened, hasn't even come close.
Wait a second, the sales tax revenue for the city is $83 million, and the property tax levy is $34 million. So wouldn't you say that sales tax dwarfs property tax revenue for the city of Syracuse?
I was talking about Destiny's promise to us that because of their tax break.
How about this county's promise to you?
No, it wasn't a promise. It was a hard negotiation, a hard
Okay,
bargaining.
fine.
So let me finish my point, and then I'll get to yours. My point was, we in this community have been over and over again promised that there are magic bullet solutions. There aren't. There's only hard work and real solid public policy. But if you go and ask somebody to vote for it, a promise, don't buy it. You want to vote for something that's real and actual and that you know the details, particularly if it's your children who are in that school district.
Let's try to remember that we're not applauding each time someone speaks necessarily. Sorry, not good timing for you.
No
Go
problem.
ahead.
I didn't see my colleague, Mr. Mashwell, walk in. Have you been here the whole time? Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. In my office, you know, we're not advocating that we curl up and die, and the congressman's absolutely correct. We shouldn't. We have to do what we can do, what is within our control to make our community better. We have had 18 studies on our CSI task force. Supervisor Coogan is one of our favorite clients. We've helped her with some consolidation studies, and across the community, supervisors and town boards have called and asked for our help. Some make sense, some don't, and some we're going to continue to study. But we can do all that we can do here, and I know it's the trite, unfunded mandates, but that's it. Local politician just said recently, we're afraid to have the conversations. No, we're afraid of the answers. And we're afraid to stick up to the bullies in Albany and say, you're the problem. So I'd like to ask the congressman, a phenomenal member of Congress, not talking about the Health Care Act, whether you liked it or not, but the FASO amendment. Do you support it? Do you see it as a sign of how much mandates are forced upon us by the governor and Albany? And will you advocate to Albany that they have to start cutting our property tax bill and stop forcing unfunded mandates on counties?
Well, I've not read John Faso and Congressman Collins' amendment, but basically, as I understand it, it would require that New York State take on the Medicaid responsibilities that they should have. And I absolutely agree. I've been preaching that gospel for as long as I can remember. We got a bad deal, and it's still a bad deal. But what I do like is closer to home, Al Sturpey has a bill in that if we did do a consensus, do a merger or whatever you want to call it, create a metropolitan greater Syracuse that embraces all of the county, that's one big city, not one big debt district. It would be a city with actual resources and revenues and opportunity and growth for kids. But yeah, I like what John Faso tried to do. I like what Al Sturpey's trying to do. This is what we can do using this process to leverage the state of New York. The governor, God bless him, he didn't ask us to do this, and we didn't ask him to help us do it. We started this long before he got involved in this. And he likes the idea, so he proposed legislation that would get us additional revenues for every dollar we save. He's proposed that the state will match that. That's great. We like that. But we also say we like Al Sturpey's bill better. You take all the Medicaid responsibilities as soon as we do this deal, and we can drop our property taxes by over 50%.
But it's going to come with a hitch, and the hitch is they're going to take back our sales tax. So we're going to be break even, maybe a few $1 million to the good for as long as it takes for them to come back and take the money. If Al Sturpey's bill is signed into law tomorrow morning, that they're going to take $100 million off our property tax bill with no hitch, no taking back of the sales tax, let me know where I sign on the dotted line. But that's just not going to happen.
And let me just add that I find it really interesting that we're not allowed to talk about going to Albany about unfunded mandates, but we are allowed to talk about going to Albany about Medicaid savings. So you can't have it both ways. Either we go to Albany to tell them they own part of our problems and they should help us be part of the solution, or under your scenario, we don't do any of that. We just ourselves alone moving
Just to
forward.
clarify, who said you can't go to Albany and talk about mandates? We don't have any leverage. That's the problem. This is leverage. We don't have any leverage.
I think the fact that we all vote is leverage. I think the fact that every election time comes around, it's leverage. And I speak firsthand with this as somebody who has stood up and talked about these issues and was bullied and laughed at and personally attacked. And then you know what? Lo and behold, later, $2.5 billion of water infrastructure. Talking about the importance of infrastructure and building our economy and being said, no, we're going to have economic development. You're going to be able to fix your own pipes because everything's going to be great. Over and over again, that's what a democracy is about. It's about advocacy, and it's about holding people accountable. And we simply cannot have the kind of robust results that we want for our community if we allow Albany's policies to be unsaid and continue to drive us further and further behind.
You say that we have to hold ourselves, that we have to be accountable, okay? Isn't the real point that we have to hold ourselves accountable with respect to what kind of government we have around here, okay? Isn't it really, and do we or do we not have two governments for one community? That's what we have. We have two complete governments. We have trucks and we have fire departments. We have all kinds of assets. We have all kinds of management, and it's duplicated. That's what it is. And we need to hold ourselves accountable to change that system. And look, we don't like the mandates. We don't like Medicaid. We understand there's a ton of problems, and we've gotten really kind of in the weeds here tonight. But the bottom line is that's what's, by showing the good faith effort that we can do, of doing the things that's within our control to change this local government, to move from the kind of patchwork quilt that we have right now. But the real issue is the city and the county, because those two together are 88% of the expenses, okay? Those two governments need to become one in order for us to say to ourselves in good faith, we've done everything we can here to really rationalize having the kind of government that we need. And if you look at the consolidated, look at Nashville. Nashville, on the same scale that we were rated 100th in the country, they were 4th, okay? Every single one of the communities that we talk to you about that consolidated is way above us in economic growth.
Bill, I would just say we're doing these things. People are talking. We have studies that are being done. We've had mergers. We've had consolidations. We just had the East Syracuse Police Department merge with the town of DeWitt. That took 2 whacks at it, by the way, but it happened. So we're having these conversations. Simply merging the government is not going to just do it. And by the way, this duplication that I keep hearing about, what is a duplicative service? If you don't take the cost out of the system, and I dare say it, if you don't cut services, you're not going to save money. That's how you save money. You don't go out to dinner if you can't afford it. So if we're going to provide the same services that we want to provide, it's going to cost money. Will there be some efficiencies, maybe having one boss instead of 2? Yeah, okay, here and there, but it's not going to amount to the savings that consensus believes it will.
And let me just say, too, we have 2 governments. If you're a new American refugee on the north side and you're worried about what's going to happen to you, who's speaking for you? If you were gay and you wanted to marry your partner so that you could have death benefits, who's speaking for you? When we're talking about income inequality and the minimum wage, who raised it first? We did in the city of Syracuse. So do we have multiple levels of government? Yes, but they represent people and important voices, voices that are important to the future of our country, not just to the future of us locally. So the Onondaga County, they represent the city. They do all the same things, and yet you have heard deafening silence on these issues in this year of all years when we have started to really realize everything is political. And who's speaking for the people who are being disenfranchised, feel like they're being ignored, feel like that they have been left behind. Government is not just a bank. Government is about speaking for people and empowering people.
Okay, we're going to move on to the question portion of the debate. So again, just to remind you, there are a couple microphones going around. Please raise your hands if you'd like to ask a question, make a point, make it brief, and direct it to one team or another if possible. We have this woman here. We'll take these. They're gonna ferry it in by courier, but these two folks right here will start, and then we'll get that side of the room.
Hi, I want to express my appreciation for this evening. It was 8:05 before the word school was mentioned. That has been the huge elephant in the room in terms of acceptance of the consensus report. I think more is owed to the people of this community to deal with that issue and not say that we can do consensus consolidation and some point down the road we will address the issue of schools and the importance for in-migration rather than endless out-migration. Thank you.
Are you directing that to the affirmative?
I would like everybody's thoughts about it.
Okay, quickly, go ahead.
How can we ignore that?
I can assure you we did not ignore it. There was a lot of discussion early on in the process, some 3 years ago. But you can see how difficult it is just for this, just for governance. And the schools operate under different laws. They have different budgeting rules. We decided that we just couldn't take that on. We agree that it needs to be reviewed. We actually, in our report, suggested that there should be a similar project taken on. But, 19 volunteers plus staff, and I'd like to thank Kathy Murphy, who has given up pretty much her whole life for the last 3 years on this thing. I think we were realistic in knowing that we couldn't take on the whole Megillah, so we took on half the Megillah.
Then wait for the second half to be developed and presented to the community as a unity, not as let's do this.
In the city, the schools are part of the city, but they're not in the towns and villages. It's a different governmental structure, and the rules are different. So, I get your point, but we just didn't think we could take it on.
Let me speak to that issue and give you another context. It's often talked about, and it was talked about in consensus, some of the remarks about poverty in the city of Syracuse, and what are we going to do to help poverty? And I said to the consensus members when they came to me, I said, if you look at the studies that have done in other communities that have been able to mitigate poverty, they've done 3 things. Raj Chetty, the Economic Opportunity Project, he's an MIT person, you can all Google it and find it. Said you do 3 things. The first is that you make sure that your schools are integrated by class. The second is that you make sure that you do not concentrate affordable housing all in one small location. And the third thing you do is you empower people in their community so that they have social capital so that they can work and be part of these solutions. And I respectfully say to you that none of those things are done in this report.
Okay, we have one right here. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to all of our debaters. It's really informative. Could someone please clarify for me the status under the consolidation proposal of the towns and villages? We hear, and the conversation tends to lead with the talk of the 26 departments of public works and the 54 fire departments, and I only get to those numbers if I include towns and villages. And it's been my understanding that they are not participating or not required to participate, so I find that a very confusing and, for me, incomplete part of this proposal and very, one with a significant impact on projected savings. Thank you.
Yes, under the proposal, the towns and villages would have the ability to opt out. Or opt in. Okay, or they would have the ability to move. For example, in highway services, we propose this core highway services area, where a town could continue to exist but move its public works function into a more comprehensive organization. Same thing when it comes to fire. Okay.
Separate vote at a separate time?
It's possible. There's some dispute over whether or not a referendum would be needed at the town level. Okay, I think that's something that we need to find out in the future, exactly whether or not there would be a referendum required for each one, or it depends on the different function. There may be ability to move.
Any sense of which towns and villages are in or out?
I know that at least one town passed a resolution against any consolidation, like the day after the preliminary report came out last June, kind of like Mr. Antonacci, who announced his opposition to consensus based on the preliminary report last May.
I never said that. Never said that. Wrote a letter to the editor and talked about a lot of things we talked about tonight, that the savings that we think is going to materialize just isn't going to. But I want to add to that. There's several town supervisors in this room tonight. I won't single any more of them out. But if you don't think every one of them is trying to save money in their community, you're just sadly mistaken. Every day they work hard. Their town boards work hard. If there's an opportunity to save money, they're going to take advantage of it. Nobody's out here to try to waste people's money. But again, a mega merger, we're going to be disappointed.
This gentleman up here, and there's another hand on this side. We'll put the microphone. We'll just go right down the row there. Go ahead, sir.
So I wanted to follow up on a point that Mr. Byrne made in his introductory remarks about the report that came out a couple years ago about the concentration of poverty in Syracuse. The striking thing for me in reading that report was not just the level of concentrated poverty in Syracuse, but the author noted that this wasn't accidental, that it was the result of deliberate policy choices, land use among them. The consensus report talks about the number of officials, 550 officials scattered across Onondaga County involved in land use planning. And it also calls for a countywide enforceable land use policy. And I'd like to understand how a vote in favor would result in that outcome.
Well, I simply think it wouldn't, because the only question before the House is with the merger of Syracuse into Onondaga County. So all the towns and villages would still have their zoning policies and their planning policies that would, in effect, you would still have the concentration of affordable housing in the city of Syracuse. Because of all of those zones and plans and deliberate decisions that have been made all along.
Might I add also that, you hear all this talk about these politicians don't want to work themselves out of a job. The consensus plan actually increases the number of elected officials.
Do either of you folks want to respond to his question or to what you've heard?
No, but I'd like to make a point. The mayor mentioned earlier on that she disputed our numbers on the voting members of the city council. And so the voting members of the city council is really, it's 2 out of 10. I was a city council president too. I voted once in 4 years. So the city council president could be counted, I suppose, but not realistically. But the point I wanted to make was she said that that these mergers and these metropolitan cities that were created did not improve minority representation. They did. They clearly did. Jacksonville or Indianapolis, before the merger, there were 7. After the merger today, there are 32. In Jacksonville, there were none. No minority members of the legislature. Today, there are 32. And in Nashville, there were 10, and today there are 25. So part of we had 3 goals in this process, and they were to create opportunity for economic growth for our kids and our grandkids. Second, to have an inclusive, accessible government, and 3, to modernize and improve services.
Okay, now I'm going to interject. There's a specific point there made about the representation. If this side wants to respond to it briefly, but then I want to get back to the questions that the audience is driving here.
I
So
would
go
like
ahead.
to respond to it. First, I would tell you that as a president of the council, he does have power. People do run for it. If you want to say that the president doesn't have any power or any role, that's your perspective. But 3 out of 10 is
Voting power.
He does. He can vote, or she
In a
can
tie.
vote. Yeah.
Once every 3 years.
Well, that's still a vote. People still run for it. But I think that this is an excellent point, though, about minority representation. Because what the congressman is saying to all of us, the illustration is that the change in governance actually resulted in more minorities, however you define them, being represented. And that was contrary to everything that I had read and everything that I had learned. So we asked the question, what was the baseline you used? And the baseline that they used, for Nashville, you used a baseline that predated the Voting Rights Act. In Indianapolis, you used a baseline that was just 5 years after it. In Jacksonville, you used a baseline during the years which schools were just beginning to be desegregated. So I would say to you, the consolidation dates of 1962 in Nashville, Jacksonville, 1967, Indianapolis, 1970, that perhaps what was really fundamentally got more people represented is Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, is Selma, is the Voting Rights Act, is the Civil Rights Act. That all of that was what caused people to get active and vote, not a form of government. Just like they're saying to us, you change the form of government, we'll have all this economic energy. No, you'll just change the form of government. In the process, you'll disenfranchise people.
The next person with the question, go ahead. Who's
Just have
there?
a quick comment. When they had the events at the Southwest Community Center, and they talked about this merger, and I heard our former congressman say that they did a polling and that people were for it. When I was at the center each time, no one at the center was for the merger. So I'm just curious as to who did you poll, one. And let me finish, just let me finish. And then to follow up on the young lady's question about the schools, I asked that question. Why didn't you put
I think
the schools?
I'm going to interview because I want to try to keep this with one
real
question
quick.
to a person.
Just
We're starting to
why
get away
didn't you
from
put the
that.
schools on the table? And the first thing they said, it would have been dead in the water.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
So we hired Sienna Information Services or polling services or whatever, and they polled typically, like everybody else does, registered likely voters. Sample about 400 or 500, and the poll came out. 48% were in favor, 45% opposed, and the balance were undecided. I can't tell you who they called. They didn't call me, but they did call registered likely voters in Onondaga County.
You're okay with that? Okay, there's another
Well,
gentleman.
can I-
Briefly, go ahead,
Of
yeah.
course, if you call somebody and say, hey, can I save you some money? Will you go with it? Who's going to say no? But again, we don't have a plan. We don't have details. I'm all for voting, putting this before the people, but it can't be with some pie in the sky, we're going to save you money. It has to be a plan that is agreed to and approved by the unions and all the officials in those governments.
I would like to take offense to your characterization of the savings proposed in the budget as being pie in the sky. We did a lot of work on this, okay? We looked at a lot of different factors, and for you to say that the potential savings on this consolidation are pie in the sky, I think is an unfair statement, and I just can't let it go by.
Can I say something to that?
Quickly, and then we're going to move on.
So I spoke with Beth Greenwood, who's the mayor of Tully. The kind of maybe not unironic part of this is that consensus really did build consensus between the Democratic city and the Republican towns and villages. Beth Greenwood, who's the mayor of the village of Tully, she gets elected to office. She has 3 DPW workers. And she says, I want to merge them with the town officials, the town DPW workers. And they did all the work, and they found, yep, you have to increase the salaries that you pay them, and therefore there would be no savings. It would actually end up costing the village more money to do that. Consensus came and did a cost per mile of what it costs the village of Tully. And she looked at it, she said, that makes no sense. And she called and she said, where did you get this number? And they said, well, we took your DPW workers and we divided by the number of miles you had. She said, well, my DPW workers also do my sewer work. They also do my parks work. They also do my water work. They're not just DPW workers. And she said to Consensus, you need to change that number. Consensus didn't change that number. Details in governance, like everything else, matter. And when you start talking about savings, that you're going to get savings, I have yet to find a consolidation that has occurred in this country that has actually resulted in savings.
Yes.
They don't result in
So we're having a back and forth on savings. I want to give the affirmative side to respond back to this, and then I want to introduce a question from the overflow room.
Well, your debate partner said earlier on that the town of Clay merged police services and they saved $7 million or $12 million in 7 years. So there's an example.
How about the merger of Aqua and the Metropolitan Water Board? Wasn't that a merger?
It's all fluff. There is no savings of Aqua and MWB right now. It was a sale. It's true, Dan. It was salesmanship to get it passed in the budget. Period. Nobody wants to talk about it though.
I have a question here from the overflow room, and it appears, I would say, to be originally directed toward the affirmative. And it's this: given that the Syracuse School District is a dependent district, how will the creation of a new metropolitan form of government impact the cost or debt allocations for that district? That's the question.
So the school district would continue to be funded by city residents. It's their school district. So taxes would be raised on property tax. They would use their state aid as they do now. I mean, the city budget, not school district, but city budget is about $288 million. The city's tax levy is $34 million, barely 10% of the cost to run city government, let alone the school district. So the school district will continue to get state aid. It will continue to benefit from sales tax. It will continue to benefit from economic development deals that at least one of the IDAs does. And so, that's not going to change. But as I said, let's talk about debt district. It's a great, it has real cachet, debt district. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about growing our city, making it more sustainable. And the school district would be kept separate unless there was a new consensus commission after this one's successful and they decided to do something consolidation-wise with the schools.
Another consolidation that worked extremely well for the county that not only saved money but also improved service was the 911 center, okay? We replaced separate emergency call centers. We put in a unified system with improved technology, eliminated misdirected emergency calls, saved money and saved lives. And we improved this asset for the entire community, and that's exactly what that was a consolidation.
Yes, and Mayor Bernardi sued the county and how we paid for it over the abstract. So the reason that it became successful, we ultimately, as a city, had to sue the county in order to make sure that the allocation was correct. And when I said consolidations in other places, so this has been studied by Louisville's Professor Savage. I gave those studies and referenced them in my first letter after the preliminary recommendations were out. The National Research Council commissioned a review of consolidations and concluded that, quote, there is general agreement that consolidation has not reduced costs and, in fact, may have increased total local expenditures. In Jacksonville, no measurable impact. In Metro Miami, studies found costs actually rose after the consolidation. In Louisville, they, quote, failed to deliver on the key arguments used to promote it. Again, these were after the preliminary recommendations. I was asked as elected official to let the public do this. But let me finish. I sent a letter to Consensus. I cited these studies. I cited this information. I said, give me something back. It shows me different.
Okay, let me give you something back. My study on Louisville is from Jeff Wachter. It's called A 10-Year Perspective of the Merger of Louisville and Jefferson County. It says that while population growth and economic changes may only partially attributed to the merger, improvements in government efficiency and efficacy are primarily the product of the merger. The new government has been able to provide a comparable level of service without increasing costs, with fewer employees, achieving a major goal of merger advocates. Additionally, having a single government setting the agenda and ordering priorities has been beneficial. Through the merger, Louisville Metro government has gained an ability to address major issues and move forward on substantial projects, both big and small. Fears of opponents to the merger have not come to fruition.
All right, and I'm going to take this gentleman's question right up here.
Yeah, I have a statement here. This is from the New York State Constitution. This is Article 8, Section 9. This may bring some clarity for some people to understand what's going to happen.
And it's a short section, I hope.
Oh, very short.
Okay.
When debt incurring power of certain counties shall cease, whenever the boundaries of any city are the same of those of a county, or when any city includes within the boundaries more than one county, the power of any county wholly included within such city to contract indebtedness shall cease. Now, the thing is, if we lose our power to spend money, who's going to control that? And if you live in a township or an area that lives within its means, you're going to be punished by this. People have to understand, I know you're not going to like this, we're not a democracy. We're actually a constitutional republic, according to Article 4, Section 4, and you really need to read the Constitution to understand that.
Do you folks want to take, nope? Okay, all right, let's take one last question before we go to closing statements. I know there are more, but we can continue that conversation. There's a woman right there in the center. Let's. No, well, the folks in the other room need you to have that mic.
Okay. I'm Sharon Owens. I'm the director of the Southwest Community Center and a consensus member, commission member. And biasly, I will say that we had the best 3 sessions of all of them. Very good conversation. Schools. I made that comment. It was going to die on arrival. And this is why. Until this community begins to deal with some deep-seated, real, socio-economic, and racially driven issues we have. You're not going to sell me the swamp land that a kid on South Ave is going to have the same ability and shared resources of a kid in Fayetteville Manlius. Until we begin to deal with our communities, deep-seated, socioeconomic, and racist foundational issues. That's why we couldn't deal with schools.
And let me ask for brief responses to that, and then we'll move to the closing arguments. Either side want to jump in on that? One last question? Okay, I'll make an exception, I guess.
Thank you. I have a lot of questions, but I just want to clarify. I don't think it would be responsible to leave some of the things that were said that weren't exactly accurate out there. First of all, when Onondaga County and the counties got the Medicaid mandate from the state, it was a negotiation that included our right on the local level to collect sales tax. So I think people should understand that were those mandates to go, the revenue that came with them would probably go. There is $1 million, at least, in savings between Aqua and Metropolitan Water Board. You can read the budget in Onondaga County and see it.
Seriously, don't he let him audit it? I mean, if
He does. He's the auditor.
Let me ask you.
No, there were Teamsters.
Let me ask you to make your quick points, and then we'll give the sides quick response,
Okay.
and then I want to move to closing arguments.
Okay.
So please.
With respect to the union issues, there were Teamsters at the Onondaga County Water Authority and CSEA at the Metropolitan Water Board, and we successfully merged. The county is older than the city, and downtown does not go away in a merger. We don't take downtown and bring it somewhere else. And then 2 more quick clarifications. The city of Syracuse is in Onondaga County. Onondaga County also represents African Americans, gays, immigrants, and everybody, and we do it well and we do it proudly. So the notion that we're county government to take over some of the responsibilities, the people who live in the city are currently county residents. I hope everybody understands that when we talk about the city versus county, the city is in the county. And my final comment is I could virtually guarantee to you that like the consolidation of purchasing and like the consolidation of water, were we to create a metropolitan government, almost no one would have any difference in their daily lives. You would see virtually no change. We're talking about 2 governments. We're not talking about taking the roads away or rolling up the sidewalks or the awnings or taking away services. We're talking about governments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not hearing anything I think the affirmative is going to want to disagree with. So let me let the negative have just a quick chance to respond to that, and then I want to move to closing arguments.
Look, I'm going to just focus on a couple of things. Onondaga County does represent the city of Syracuse. Have you heard anybody from Onondaga County talk about sanctuary city status? If you are a refugee or a new American on the north side of the city, or you are somebody who lives in the near west side, you want to know that. The right to marry. Did we see anybody stand up and talk about the right to marry and advocate for that? We raised our own minimum wage for our own employees to $15 an hour long before New York State did that. long before it became an issue. Onondaga County's been silent. So these are issues for people, and as Sharon very eloquently said, these are people who are often voiceless, and city government gives them voice, and it makes that they have a voice so that we can form a more perfect union together by empowering people and letting them know that they are important to us. Silence is not empowering people.
Okay, thank you. And we're going to move to the closing arguments now, and we begin with the affirmative, and I believe that Congressman Walsh will be delivering that statement. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, here's where we are. Let me just say thank you to all of you for coming out. I've always said democracy is not a spectator sport. You got to roll up your sleeves, and you did. Tonight's discussion was difficult. We're talking about change. We're asking why things are the way they are. We're offering real alternatives. Status quo has left us with a stagnant population, painfully slow economic growth, too many people in poverty, and a real question about the viability of our government structures and services that we all depend on. Our 50 recommendations show that we can have better representation, better services, real savings, and new revenue streams, helping to make our economy stronger. We can do this. Yes, it's a hard conversation, but I'm so proud that we're having it here in my hometown. So thank you to Grant Rear at Syracuse University for hosting us tonight. Thank you to Mayor Miner and Controller Antonacci, your worthy opponents. Thank you again to all the consensus volunteers who worked so long and so hard to produce this result, and I think it's a good result. And again, thank you all for coming out to learn more about this issue. We must keep the conversation going. Talk to your neighbors, read the report, make up your own mind. It's the only way we can make an informed decision for our future. My final thought, your voice matters. It matters. We must do better, but it won't happen if you don't demand it. It's your voice which will determine whether our roads will continue to deteriorate or whether we can start paving again, whether we're closing fire stations or building new ones, whether our children and our grandchildren continue to leave for better opportunities elsewhere, or if we create a community so vibrant and an economy so strong that they'll proudly stay and write the next great chapter in Syracuse's storied history. This is not dead on arrival. Oh no, it's not dead on arrival. It can't be, and our future is not dead on arrival either. When another elected official says nobody wants this, remind them that some people do want this. That's why it's up to you now. Don't let anyone take your voice away. We know that they're opposed, but where do you stand? There's only one way to find out. Let them know tonight with a vote for reform as you walk out these doors, and then let everyone else have a voice too. Demand a public referendum. It's the surest sign that our community cares about its future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we'll have now closing statement from the negative, and Mayor Miner will be delivering that statement.
Thank you. I want to start with where I began, commending the consensus members for their hard work. You know, cities are contradictions of capitalism spelled out in crowds. They are engines of prosperity and inequality in equal measure. And when inequality tips rich, they look unjust. And when it tips poor, they look unsalvageable. To be in a city is to be in a constant struggle. Downtown Syracuse does well, and people resent it as a sign of rich houses for rich people. Other neighborhoods struggle, and they're cesspools of hopelessness. How do we solve this problem? By identifying the causes of the problem and having an intellectually fact-based solution, not promises based on wishful thinking, not empire zones, nothing like it in the world tax breaks, not inordinate press conferences promising thousands of jobs. There are no magic solutions, only hard-earned lessons. Don't believe the hype. There are no easy answers, and nothing is free. Cities are the essential American experiment. They shine by attracting people often outcasts, like poor people and immigrants, gays, geeks, artists. But they thrive by asking these different people to live and share together. And it's that diversity and that energy that is essential to compete in our world's economy. But it is as important, it is essential to find the commonality in our humanity while holding on to the uniqueness of each of our individual experiences. So together we can live and thrive in peace and proudly say we're Americans. Never has this been more important now than the time we're living in. Giving people voices in their government, their future, ensuring that they are participants in finding the solution, no matter how hard it is. While well-meaning and commendable, our opponents ask us to believe, despite all the evidence to the contrary, that eliminating the city of Syracuse alone will turn around our economic fortunes. The data shows that instead it will smother the budding flame of vitality and economic growth and strip away hard-earned empowerment at a time when both are existential for our future. It is for that reason that I ask that you vote no on the proposition. Thank you.
Thank you. Don't go anywhere yet. Thank you. I have a few things I want to say in closing. First of all, I want to thank the panelists for a great debate, a lively debate, a spirited debate, and being mindful of the time, most of the time. And I also want to thank all of you for attending and contributing. I have a few other things I want to say, but first, let's give the debaters and ourselves another round of applause.
This is a fantastic public service. Thank you, Maxwell.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim.
Our pleasure. Thank you. So first, in the tradition, still have a couple more things here, and I'll be brief. In the tradition of other Oxford-style debates and parliamentary bodies around the world, we'd like to ask you to vote on tonight's debate by walking out of one of two doors. And don't do it yet. The affirmative door is to your left here, and the negative door is to your right. But since we know that we are not used to doing that, we're also asking you to fill out a paper ballot similar to the one that you filled out on your way in outside. And the ballot box and the ballots are outside here. Now, I have to tell you, we are not employing sophisticated voter fraud techniques for this. But we believe that a civic group like this can be trusted, and I will just remind you that we are in the Maxwell School of Citizenship, and George Washington is outside watching you. I'm almost done here. I have a question for the audience. Does someone have a debate brochure with the letters CD circled on the back? Okay, we've identified this person. All right. Hold on to that brochure, sir. We are giving each of the debaters some Maxwell swag as a token of our appreciation, but as a symbol of the importance of the audience's role, we want to give another set of that swag to one of the members of the audience, and that, sir, is you. So it's waiting for you outside. Congratulations. That brings me to my final point, the reception that's waiting for us outside. We have food and drink outside. Please join us for that. After you have filled out your ballot, we'll continue the conversation, or we'll figure out something else to argue over. I-81 comes to mind, for example. But absent that, we just want to thank you all again. Thank you very much.